Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. 6 months after my divorce, people still ask me the same question. How did you know? Truth was, I didn't know at first. I noticed. There's a difference. Sylvia didn't wake up one morning and become a different woman. It happened slowly, small things first. She started taking her phone everywhere, bathroom, laundry room, even the kitchen when she poured coffee. Before that, she used to leave it face up on the counter without caring. Then came the gym membership. My wife had hated gyms for 8 years. Suddenly she was there 5 nights a week wearing matching outfits that looked too expensive for cardio. I watched, quietly. That's the thing people don't understand. Men who lose control start yelling too early. I wasn't interested in yelling. I was interested in facts. One Friday night, we had dinner reservations downtown with a few friends and business contacts. Sylvia spent nearly an hour getting ready. Black dress, gold earrings I bought her in Miami, perfume she usually saved for vacations. You trying to impress somebody? I asked while fixing my cufflinks. She smirked. Maybe I still like looking good for my husband. Yeah, I said. Maybe. The restaurant was crowded, loud music, dim lights, the kind of place where people cheated comfortably because nobody paid attention to anyone except themselves. Jacob Sullivan was already there when we arrived. That mattered. Jacob wasn't just my business partner, he'd been my friend for 12 years. Vacations together, holidays together. He'd sat at my table more times than my own brother. He hugged Sylvia first, not me. I noticed that too. Dinner moved normally at first. Drinks, steaks, business talk. Sylvia laughed harder at Jacob's jokes than necessary. Every time I looked up, they were already looking at each other. Then Sylvia's phone buzzed. She checked it quickly and stood up. I'll be right back. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I noticed Jacob checking his watch for the 3rd time that night. Then he pushed his chair back casually. Need to make a call, he said. Sure, I replied. He disappeared toward the hallway near the restrooms. That was enough for me. I waited another minute, set my napkin down, and stood up calmly. Excuse me. The hallway was empty, but when I pushed through the back exit near the kitchen, I found them behind the building near the employee parking lot. Not kissing. Worse. Comfortable. Sylvia stood close enough to touch him. Jacob leaned against the wall, smiling while she adjusted his tie like she'd done it 100 times before. Then he said quietly, "He suspects anything?" Sylvia laughed under her breath. "Charlie barely notices when I change my hair." That line stayed with me, not because it hurt, because it told me 2 things immediately. First, something was happening. Second, they both thought I was stupid. I stepped back before they saw me, went inside, sat down, finished my drink. When Sylvia returned 7 minutes later, she smiled like nothing happened. "You okay?" she asked. "Perfect," I said. And I meant it. Because by then, I already knew what I was going to do next. The next morning, I hired a private investigator named Raymond Vance, former military. Gray hair, no wasted words. We met in his office above an auto shop across town. He listened quietly while I explained everything. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me for a second. "Give me a few days," he said. "That enough?" "It usually is." Then he closed the folder, stood up, and nodded toward the door. "I'll call you." Raymond Vance worked fast. 3 days after I hired him, he called me at 7 in the morning. "Don't talk," he said. "Just listen." I stood in my kitchen while Sylvia slept upstairs. "She's meeting Jacob regularly," Raymond continued. "Not random, structured. Tuesdays and Thursdays mostly. Same hotel downtown. Different room numbers every time." I looked out the window at my truck parked in the driveway. "Anything else?" A pause. "Yes." That one word told me enough already. Raymond met me 2 nights later in a parking garage beneath a shopping center. He handed me a thick envelope without saying much. Inside were photos. Sylvia entering the Grand Crescent Hotel. Jacob behind her 30 seconds later. Another picture showed them at a rooftop bar across town. His hand rested low on her back. Too comfortable. Too familiar. I kept flipping. Then I stopped. One photo hit harder than the rest. My lake house. The one my father left me before he died. Sylvia and Jacob stood on the back deck drinking wine together while I was supposedly away on a business trip in Denver. Except I hadn't gone to Denver. I'd canceled that trip last minute because Sylvia claimed she was sick and wanted to stay home alone. Raymond watched my face carefully. "You okay?" "Yeah." But my jaw tightened hard enough to hurt. He reached into his coat and handed me a second envelope. This matters more than the affair. Inside were printed bank records, transfers, large ones, money moving quietly from one company account into another consulting account Jacob controlled. I looked up slowly. He's stealing from me? Looks like they were planning ahead, Raymond said calmly. And Charlie, your wife knew. I stared at the papers for a long moment. How long? At least 8 months. 8 months. That meant vacations, holidays, my birthday dinner, Christmas at my mother's house. All fake. Raymond leaned against the concrete wall behind him. I've done this 20 years, he said. Most affairs are emotional, sloppy, temporary. And this? This looks planned. That hit harder than the cheating. Not because Sylvia slept with another man, because she smiled in my face while helping him position himself to take my business too. I slid everything back into the envelope carefully. No shaking hands, no anger, just clarity. What do you want me to do now? Raymond asked. I looked toward the garage exit. Nothing yet, I said. I want them comfortable. Then I smiled for the first time in days. People make mistakes when they think they've already won. A week later, I invited Jacob and Sylvia to dinner. Private room, high-end steakhouse downtown, the kind of place where executives celebrated mergers and politicians cheated on their wives. Jacob walked in smiling like nothing had changed. Charlie, he said, shaking my hand. Big night? You could say that. Sylvia arrived a few minutes later wearing a dark red dress. She kissed my cheek and sat beside me like we were still normal. For the first 20 minutes, I played my role perfectly. We ordered drinks, talked business. Jacob started discussing a new expansion plan for the company. That Phoenix account could double revenue next year, he said confidently. Maybe, I replied. Sylvia looked between us carefully. She could feel something was off. Women always could. You're quiet tonight, she said. I'm listening, Jacob laughed. That's dangerous with Charlie. Means he's calculating something. You have no idea. The waiter brought steaks and wine. Nobody touched the food. I reached into my jacket slowly and placed a hotel key card on the table. Room 814, Grand Crescent Hotel. Jacob's smile disappeared first. Sylvia froze beside me. I leaned back in my chair. Interesting place, I said calmly. You two seem to like it. Nobody spoke. Then Jacob cleared his throat. Charlie, whatever you think. I don't think, I interrupted. I verify. I pulled out several photographs and spread them across the table one at a time. Sylvia at the hotel, Jacob kissing her outside the parking garage, the lake house. That one made Sylvia pale immediately. Charlie, she whispered. I looked directly at Jacob. My father built that house himself. Jacob tried to recover fast. Listen, man, this wasn't supposed to... Don't call me man. Silence, heavy silence. People in the next room laughed over glasses and music while my marriage died 3 feet away. Sylvia finally grabbed my arm. Please let me explain. I moved my arm away calmly. No, I said. You already explained enough for 8 months. Jacob straightened in his seat, trying to regain control. This isn't all on her. I actually laughed once at that. You think I care whose idea it was? Then I pulled out the bank records. That changed everything. Jacob's face drained instantly. Sylvia looked confused. What is that? Oh, I said quietly. So he didn't tell you? Jacob stood up fast. Charlie, you stole from me, I said flatly. That's the part I can't forgive. Sylvia turned toward him sharply. Jacob, what is he talking about? But Jacob stayed silent. And right there, for the first time all night, Sylvia realized she might not have been the only person lying. Jacob tried to leave the restaurant. I stood before he could take 2 steps. Sit down. My voice wasn't loud, but it stopped him cold. People like Jacob only respected pressure when they felt it directly. He looked at Sylvia, then back at me. You don't want to do this here. I already am. Slowly, he sat back down. Sylvia looked between us like she was trying to catch up to a conversation that had started without her. Charlie, she said carefully, what money? I slid the bank records toward her. Transfers, shell accounts, consulting payments that didn't exist. I watched her eyes move across the pages. Then her face changed. Not guilt. Shock. You told me those were investor payments, she said quietly to Jacob. Jacob rubbed his jaw. Sylvia? No. She pushed the papers back at him. You said Charlie already approved everything. That interested me. A lot. I looked at Jacob. So you used my wife, too. Don't act innocent, he snapped suddenly. She still slept with me. Sylvia stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped over. You said you were separating from Vanessa. Jacob laughed bitterly. And you said Charlie was emotionally unavailable. Guess we both lied. There it was, the real version. Not romance, not passion. Two selfish people feeding each other excuses. I stayed calm while both of them unraveled in front of me. Then Sylvia turned toward me again, eyes wet now. Charlie, I swear to you I didn't know he was stealing. Maybe not, I said. But you knew enough. That's not fair. Fair? I leaned forward slightly. You spent 8 months sneaking around with my business partner while coming home to me every night. Don't talk to me about fair. Jacob grabbed his jacket. I'm done here. I slammed my hand down on the table, hard enough to rattle the glasses. You're done when I say you're done. That made him pause. I reached into my inside pocket and handed him a folded envelope. Inside were legal notices already prepared by my attorney. Account freezes, partnership dissolution, fraud investigation paperwork. Jacob looked up sharply. You planned this? Of course I did. Sylvia stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Good. I wanted that. I stood and adjusted my cuffs calmly. By tomorrow morning, I told Jacob, you'll lose access to every company account you've touched. Then I looked at Sylvia. As for you, her breathing slowed like she was bracing for impact. I want you out of my house before I get home tonight. Charlie, please. You made your decision 8 months ago. I dropped cash on the table for the untouched dinners. Then I walked out first. Neither of them followed me. When I got home that night, Sylvia was still there. 3 suitcases sat near the front door. She stood in the kitchen wearing one of my old college hoodies like somehow that still meant something. You said tonight, she said carefully. I'm packing. I poured myself a drink without answering. She followed me into the living room. Charlie, talk to me. I already did. You blindsided me. That almost made me smile. Interesting choice of words. She folded her arms tightly. I made a mistake. No, I said. You made a schedule. That shut her up for a second. I sat down across from her calmly. You lied for 8 months. You brought him into my house, my lake house. You sat next to me at family dinners knowing exactly what you were doing. Her eyes watered immediately. It wasn't supposed to go this far. It always goes this far. Silence filled the room. Then she said the one thing I already expected. You were distant. There it is. I'm serious, Charlie. You buried yourself in work. You stopped seeing me. You could have divorced me. She looked away because we both knew the answer to that. Divorce wouldn't have given her excitement, secrecy, attention, or access to my business through Jacob. I never stopped loving you, she whispered. I took a slow sip of whiskey. That's what makes this ugly. Her face tightened. You think this doesn't hurt me too? I think you're finally dealing with consequences. That hit hard. I could see it. Then Sylvia sat down slowly across from me. There's something else, she admitted quietly. I didn't react. The affair didn't start 8 months ago. I already knew I wouldn't like whatever came next. When then? She swallowed once. Your birthday trip in Aspen. For a second, the room went completely silent. I remembered that trip perfectly. Jacob drinking with me by the fire, Sylvia laughing beside us, the 3 of us taking photos together like family. One night, Sylvia claimed she went upstairs early because she had a headache. Jacob disappeared 40 minutes later, saying he needed a phone charger from his room. I looked at her carefully now. That was the first time? She nodded slowly. A year, not 8 months. A full year of lies. Something inside me shut off right there. Not exploded, not shattered. Just shut off. Sylvia saw it happen too. Charlie, I stood up calmly. You should leave now. Please don't do this. I looked directly at her. You already did. Word spread fast after the restaurant. Not because of me, I stayed quiet. Jacob was the one who panicked. By the end of the week, people in our business circle already knew there was an investigation tied to missing company funds. Nobody had details, but rumors travel faster than facts. Then Vanessa found out. Jacob's wife called me herself. Is it true? She asked. I stood in my office looking out over the parking lot below. Yes. A long silence followed. Then she asked the only question that mattered. How long? A year. She hung up without another word. 3 nights later, there was a charity event downtown for one of our biggest clients. 200 people, investors, executives, local media. Jacob still showed up. Big mistake. I saw Vanessa walk into that ballroom like a woman carrying a loaded weapon. She crossed the room calmly while Jacob was talking to a group near the bar. Then she threw a glass of wine directly into his face. The entire room froze. "You embarrassed me for a year," she said loudly. "Now everybody gets to see you." Jacob grabbed napkins while cameras came out instantly. Then Vanessa pointed across the room toward Sylvia. "And you," she snapped. "You weren't special. You were convenient." Sylvia looked like she wanted the floor to open beneath her. People started whispering immediately. Nobody came to help either of them. That part mattered. Respect disappears quietly before humiliation arrives publicly. I left before security even moved. The next morning, Sylvia showed up at my office unexpectedly. No makeup, red eyes, completely different from the woman who used to walk into restaurants like she owned them. "Can we talk?" I checked my watch. "You have 5 minutes." She sat across from me carefully. "Jacob lied to me about almost everything. You expect me to care? He manipulated me." I leaned back in my chair. "Sylvia, you're 34 years old, not 16. Tears filled her eyes again. "I lost everyone. That happens. You're really this cold now?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm just done confusing forgiveness with weakness." That one landed. She looked down at her hands for a long moment before speaking again. "Why aren't you even angry anymore?" I answered honestly. "Because angry men still hope." She stared at me silently after that. And for the first time since all this started, I think she realized I wasn't coming back. 3 months later, Sylvia showed up at my apartment unannounced. Smaller place, cleaner, quiet. I opened the door and barely recognized her. The confidence was gone. No expensive dress, no sharp attitude, just exhaustion. "What do you want?" I asked. "5 minutes." "You already used those." "Please, Charlie." I stepped aside once. That was it. She walked in slowly, looking around the apartment like she was comparing it to the life we used to have. "You really started over," she said quietly. "Yeah." She nodded toward the kitchen table. "Can we sit?" I stayed standing while she talked. That was intentional. "Jacob's gone," she admitted. "Vanessa divorced him. The fraud investigation ruined his reputation. Nobody wants to work with him now." I said nothing. "He blamed me for everything." That almost made me laugh. "And you blamed me?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You think this is funny?" "No, I think it's predictable." She looked down for a second before speaking again. "I made a mistake." "You planned a replacement." Her face tightened. "That's not true." I walked to the counter, opened a folder, and tossed a stack of papers onto the table in front of her. She froze immediately. Draft divorce papers, prepared months before I confronted her. My name already printed across the top. "You were saying?" Sylvia looked genuinely shaken now. "How did you get these?" "Raymond found them." She stared at the papers silently. Then came the truth. "I wasn't sure if I'd file them." "But you were preparing." I was confused. "No," I said calmly. "You were calculating." That hit harder than yelling ever could have. She stood up suddenly. "I loved you, Charlie." I looked directly at her. "Not enough." Tears finally spilled down her face. "I know you hate me." "I don't." That surprised her. "I just see you clearly now." The room went quiet after that. Then she asked the question I think she'd been carrying for months. "Was any of it real to you?" I answered immediately. "Every second was real to me. That's why this was expensive." Sylvia broke down completely then. Quiet crying. No drama, no screaming. Just the sound of someone realizing too late that they traded stability for excitement and lost both. I walked to the door and opened it. She looked at me one last time like she wanted me to stop her. I didn't. Before leaving, she whispered softly, "I still think about us every day." I nodded once. "That's your punishment, not mine." 6 months after the divorce, I went back to the same restaurant where everything started. Same lighting, same music, same back hallway near the kitchen where I first realized my marriage was already over. Funny how a place can look exactly the same while your entire life changes around it. The hostess smiled politely. "Table for 2?" "For 1." She grabbed a menu and led me across the room. People talked loudly around me. Dates, business meetings, celebrations. A guy near the bar nervously fixing his tie before his girlfriend arrived. Life moving forward like it always does. I sat down and ordered a whiskey. Neat. The waiter recognized me from before. "You haven't been here in a while," he said. "Been busy." He nodded and walked away. That used to bother me after the divorce. How normal the world stayed while your personal life collapsed. But eventually you realize something important. The world doesn't stop for betrayal. You either rebuild or you stay broken. Jacob disappeared after the investigation started. Last I heard, he moved to Arizona, trying to start over somewhere nobody knew his name. Good luck with that. Sylvia reached out twice after our last conversation. Short messages. No manipulation this time, just regret. I never answered. Not because I hated her, because there was nothing left to discuss. That's the part people misunderstand about endings. Closure isn't another conversation. Closure is when you stop needing one. The waiter brought my drink. As I reached for the glass, my phone buzzed once. Unknown number. For a second, I already knew who it was. I looked at the screen while the whiskey sat untouched beside me. The message was short. "I'm sorry for who I became." No begging, no excuses. Just that. I stared at it for a few seconds, then locked the phone and slid it back into my pocket. Outside the restaurant windows, rain started falling across the city. A year ago, that message would have destroyed me. Now it just felt late. The waiter returned with my steak and asked, "Will someone be joining you tonight?" I looked around the restaurant one last time. At the couples, at the noise, at the version of myself who walked in here months earlier still believing loyalty was automatic. Then I looked back at him. "No," I said calmly. "Just me." And for the first time in a long time, that answer didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Thank you for watching.